We start this news edition with our top story on Belarus, where the extraordinary forced landing of a commercial flight with a Belarusian dissident aboard has escalated into one of the biggest flare-ups in the east-west tensions. A passenger plane that was scheduled to land in the Lithuanian capital Vilnius made an abrupt U-turn to Belarusian capital Minsk, all of it to arrest one passenger, Roman Protasevich, a prominent Belarusian opposition journalist who had been living in exile since 2019. Belarus's authoritarian president, Alexander Lukashenko, is already under EU sanctions over his brutal repression of protests last year. Now, European Union leaders have agreed to impose more sanctions on Belarus, including economic ones. EU leaders have also cut Europe's airlinks with Belarus and agreed on banning Belarusian airlines from the bloc and urging EU-based carriers not to fly over its airspace. They have also called for an investigation by the International Organization for Civilian Aviation into the incident. 27 leaders of the bloc have demanded an immediate release of Roman Protasevich.
This is an attack on freedom of expression, and this is an attack on European sovereignty. And this outrageous behavior needs a strong answer. Therefore, the European Council decided that there will be additional sanctions on individuals that are involved in the hijacking, but this time also on businesses and economic entities that are financing this regime.
The United Nations Civil Aviation Agency has announced an urgent meeting on Thursday. The Council's president has called an urgent meeting of 36 diplomatic representatives. The agency tweeted that it was strongly concerned by the apparent forced landing of an Ryanair flight and its passengers, which could be in contravention of the Chicago Convention. The Chicago Convention was signed in 1944 and lays out rules of airspace rights, air travel and security. However, the agency has no powers to impose sanctions. Meanwhile, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has backed calls for an independent investigation into the incident.
The Secretary General supports calls for a full, transparent and independent investigation into this disturbing incident and urges all relevant actors to cooperate with such an inquiry. The Secretary General also remains greatly concerned by the deteriorating human rights situation in Belarus in the aftermath of last August's presidential elections. He urges the Belarusian authorities to fully respect all of its international rights obligations, including in relation to the freedom of expression, assembly, and association.
Britain has banned operational permit of Belarus flag carrier Belavia and called Russia complicit. Belavia flies daily direct flights from Minsk to London's Gatwick and operates other flights to London's Heathrow via Paris. London is mulling further sanctions on Lukashenko.
What we've seen is an attack on human rights in relation to Mr. Protasevich, but also an attack on international civil aviation and international common public good. It is most important that the international community stand together, hold to account those who are responsible for these violations of international law and make sure that they never happen again.
US President Joe Biden has called the incident outrageous and backed sanctions against the nation. The US has also demanded an international probe into the incident. Dissident journalist Roman Protasevich had recently appeared in a video after his arrest by Belarusian authorities on Sunday. Protasevich is one of dozens of Belarusian journalists, activists campaigning in exile against Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko's 26-year rule. He is the founder of the Telegram channel Nexta, which helped mobilize anti-Lukashenko protests. The 26-year-old dissident has been on a government wanted list for terrorism. As a justification, Belarus has said that a false bomb threat that prompted the passenger plane to be diverted to Minsk was written in the name of Hamas. Hamas spokesperson has denied the group's involvement in the incident.
Сейчас я нахожусь в СИЗО номер 1 города Минска. Могу заявить, что никаких проблем со здоровьем, в том числе с сердцем или с какими-либо другими органами, у меня нет. Отношения со стороны сотрудников ко мне максимально корректные и по закону.
For more on this, we have Stuart Smith joining us live from Brussels. Stuart, good to see you. The EU leadership has called Belarus's action an attack on democracy. They have approved sanctions and are withholding a key investment package. Will this second round of economic pressure campaign be more successful than the one earlier this year?
The European Union will hope so. This is poor timing for Alexander Lukashenko, president of Belarus, because this action was taken a day before the EU Council meeting of all 27 EU leaders gathering together. They are the people that need to take these decisions, and we're already planning to discuss the Russia situation, how EU is acting towards Russia, how Russia's acting towards the EU. And so these new sanctions do come in the context of sanctions which were already there beforehand in order to try and put pressure on the Belarusian government to show more respect to demonstrators who are protesting against the regime. This latest round of sanctions will go some way to changing that as well, will be the hope of Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. They come in a few forms here. There are the usual sanctions that have been used before, which target individuals, potentially asset freezes and visa bans. There are the sanctions which focus also on specific businesses, but the European Commission is now also looking into whether there can be particular economic sanctions at broader parts of the Belarusian economy. And the opposition in Belarus is, for example, pointing out the lucrative state-sponsored potash and oil sectors could be one place should the European Commission Foreign Minister Josep Borrell decide to find a way to impose sanctions specifically there. But diplomats wanting to be clear, they're not trying to target any Belarusian people. They would rather focus on Lukashenko's allies and financiers in order to try and put pressure on him to change the way Belarus is going. And indeed, this other package, by withdrawing or at least holding off on that promise of billions of euros, a stick and carrot approach by the European Commission to try and create some sort of change within Belarus. But on the other hand, you have people warning, Russia analysts warning, that in imposing these sanctions, you potentially push Belarus further away from the EU and towards Russia by making it even more isolated and making it even clear that negotiations and any sort of dialogue is clearly at this stage breaking down.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is obviously Russia. Belarus has complete support from President Vladimir Putin. What is the sentiment in Brussels regarding that? Because as long as Russia backs Belarus, that means Lukashenko will boast of being powerful.
Well, interestingly, it's not clear for certain whether Russia knew about this beforehand or not. There are some clues that might suggest they weren't aware, because, for example, the spokesperson of the president was not able to go on the record with any sort of pre-prepared line. The Kremlin initially refused to prepare a statement, and the statement only came out of the Foreign Affairs Committee of Russia's parliament. So a surprisingly uncoordinated response, if that had been something the Kremlin was expecting was going to happen. Having said that, indeed, Russia does always support Belarus at the international level. President Putin has his meetings with Alexander Lukashenko to discuss Russia-Belarusian affairs. Famously, there was a pact between the two countries which was hoping to see stronger integration, but that's been on pause since the latest round of protests. So indeed, this will help Russia in a sense, because Belarus is likely to be pushed closer towards Russia and relying on it further. But on the other hand, it also gives Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko an opportunity to, in a sense, play both sides, as he has done for the past 2 decades, that if he wants to now try and make amends with the EU, he will encourage Russia to make concessions towards Belarus. If he wants to move towards to Russia, he'll force the EU to make concessions as well. So he can play both sides here, because Belarus is geopolitically and firmly geographically right between Russia and Europe. And we've seen the impact of that. Charles Michel, the European Council president, posted a picture on Twitter showing all of these planes which are now diverting around the country, many of them making quite major detours to avoid the airspace. But it shows how Belarus is quite literally in the centre of all of this.
All right, Stuart Smith, live from Brussels. Thank you very much for talking to us.